gas station, a whole gas station.
Yeah.
And it's redone into a, it's all crazy.
Oh, really?
And it's the cutest thing I ever saw.
Oh, I just love those old brick gas stations. I don't know.
It's just done such cute things. He says, you know, I love it. No,
I have so many plans for it. Yeah. Does he live there then?
he's up in north, South Dakota.
I'm live.
In town.
I don't know if you want. Your father? Well, you tell Vicky.
Anyway, that's what I was thinking. For starters, we'll operate the inside and the outside. We're gonna do like flea markets and summer just to have something going on there. Cause it's such a nice, it's 90 foot long valley. Like 90 by 60, I think, so it's pretty good space. It's a little cracked up and stuff, but I think it'll be fine.
There's no lane.
What else? Selling our farm, my first city fresh eggs. I went with Son. It's my wellness shop. It's good for all my wellness. I work with
Yeah.
He knows what we're charging for after that.
Yeah. It's a start.
Yeah, everybody asks me, so what is it? I'm like, the wellness shop. Like, it's just up to me, all the wellness shop. I don't have to ask. You never know what could be in there. I'm always up for who knows what.
Maybe use a lot of the name,
Yeah, which I will do like facials and like detox. Like that's why I don't have this on is so when I visit my hair detox then I can go get their stuff and really get the good out of it.
keep that. Vicky. Jay.
The kids love their mini baskets. Yeah, it's all about it. My grandma always said she would make baskets for neighbors and looking forward to when she would come around with little mini baskets. It's just fun. That's awesome. I love it. We got the most beautiful geraniums from Johansson's. You know, right outside of Norfolk. Do you know that greenhouse? It's like right on the west side of Norfolk before you get to it. It's a fantastic greenhouse. They have the most beautiful geraniums. Really unusual colors too.
You two gonna quiet down? School's in session here.
Uh-oh.
Good morning, Elgin Church.
Morning.
Oh, I said I wasn't gonna say anymore. My kid pointed out, I said 183 times the other day. So I'm gonna try not to say that. We had some technical difficulty with the video on YouTube last week. We think we got that figured out. It was kind of my fault. Hang on, you're going to see some movement here. We're still trying to work things out. You're going to mess up my camera.
You're fine. You'll be fine. Just talk, Linda.
All right. I last week played a video that I did not have permission for, so YouTube blocked it. That's all on me. I have permission for Michael W. Smith to play his stuff, but you have to go across copyrights to figure out everyone, so no one thinks we're trying to profit off it. So I got that all figured out, so YouTube should be fine today. We're going to find that out. It's a beautiful morning out there. Yesterday was rainy, and I don't know, I enjoyed the day. I got a porch swing up and I got to sit outside, and what a beautiful day. I was watching something for my teens to start off today. I was watching a comedian who made a comment. I called Dad right away because I liked the comment so much that I was going to use it today. And the comment is this: it only takes a simple fact for you to feel good about yourself. It takes a lot more energy to feel bad about yourself. And if you just find one thing to feel good about yourself, you're going to have a glorious day. I laugh a lot, and that's just kind of my way of dealing with life. Is I laugh, I have a good time, but feel good about yourself, because with everything going on, we're in a good place right now. This is a beautiful town. Mom, I said it again. We yesterday were gardening and doing some flower stuff, and lo and behold, I guess this was Thursday or Friday, Beth Miller drove by, and she went home, turned back, and came back with rakes and stuff, and helped my wife. And after they were done, my wife goes, "Man, we never had that before anywhere we lived. This is a special town, and we love it to death. And we're glad you're here. We're glad you were on video watching us today. What a joy it is to be alive." So if we join in prayer, we're going to start the service off, and I'll turn it over to my mother. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for everything you've given us. Yes, we're in some hard times right now, but man, there's a lot to look forward to, a lot of joy to look at in life. Please let us focus on the joy in life and not the negative. In your holy name, amen. Mother.
Amen, Mother.
Good morning. God is good.
All the time.
And all the time,
God is good.
you bet He is. This morning I have a couple things with me. Let you kids look at them a minute. They're just about alike, but they're different. Almost looks like a barbell, doesn't it? Pretty easy barbell, makes your arms strong. This one wouldn't. But I have a big balloon and a small balloon. Now if I would undo, I've got them tied here so that the air doesn't come out. If I untie this one, what happened? Nothing, did it? What do you think? What's going to happen when I undo the small balloon? Do you think the air from the small balloon is going to go in the big balloon, or is the air from the big balloon going to blow up the small balloon? Think you might be surprised. Let's try it. Jason, told you we're not going to tie this too tight, but
It only took a turn.
surprise, isn't it? You see, the small balloon, you would have thought that the big balloon, all this air in the big balloon would have gone in here, but it works the other way, because the air molecules in the small balloon are tighter and have more pressure, and the air in the big balloon, the molecules are further apart and not as strong. You know, I have a Bible verse. Bing, bing, bing. That I'm going to read you, and I want you to see if you can figure out how this works. The Bible verse is Matthew 7, 13, and 14. Enter through the narrow gates, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few will find it. Now, how do you think that works with this balloon? Where do you think the wide road or the wide gate is? That would be the big balloon, wouldn't it? And the narrow is the small balloon. You know, boys and girls, the wide road is the easy road. That's the road that everybody's doing it. Your friends, you're out playing with them, they're using bad language, or you go into the store and they might sneak or steal a piece of candy, and so everybody does it. That's the easy road. This is the hard road. This is the narrow road. This is the one that you would do what Jesus would want you to do. And you would be different. And you might get made fun of. Kids might poke fun at you for doing the right thing. But God will honor you. And if it's hard, if that's ever happened to you, and that's hard, God will help you go through it. And you will reap wonderful riches from God if you're leading the life that you want, that He wants you to lead. Can you remember that? You know, I wanted to say before I started today how special it is to have you guys watching today. I miss all of you. Sloan, I miss you and your smile. Hadley running up and down the hallway. The Bantorf twins smiling, Pete and repeat. I miss all of you. Madeline, trying to think of all of your names, but you're all special to us, and we're so glad you're with us. And I hope you remember that the wide road is the road that everybody's doing it. It's easy. But the best life that you can lead is doing the life that Jesus wants you to lead through the hard road and by doing what He would want you to do. Can you remember that? Shall we have a word of prayer? Dear Jesus, we just thank you for each boy and girl that's watching today. We just pray that they will remember that Jesus' way is the best way and will lead to the best life. Thank you. Amen.
Good to be with you. I was thinking what a blessing this is that even though we cannot be together in person as a church, we are able to touch base because of today's technology. For that, I'm very grateful. There are 3 verses of Scripture today that I want you to hang on to as we go through the meditation. Psalm 46, this directive, God says, "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm 37, "Be still before the Lord, wait patiently for Him." Nehemiah, the Levites calmed all the people saying, "Be still, this is a holy day." 1 Samuel 12, "Now then stand still and see this great thing the Lord is about to do before your eyes." I think all of us are trying desperately today to find something positive in the middle of all the negative. And there are those things out there. 2 things hit me in regard to that this past week. Keith was preaching a sermon and I was listening to it, and he was talking about how we are so programmed today. We hit life, we get on a treadmill. We've even got the children doing that. One of the most common sayings you will hear from time to time, and you have for years, keep those kids busy to keep them out of trouble, and boy are they busy. A friend of ours from the church here, they have several children, and they and their husband really love their children. They've always, it's very evident as they work and live with them. But she said this week, something good's coming out of this. More family time, more meal time, more talking. We're having time without all the interruptions to get closer to our kids. That is fantastic. One of the things I think that we've lost along the way because of the pressurized, I call our lives today pressurized, accelerated confusion. Most of us look at life and we say to each other once in a while, I wish I could slow this thing down. I wish I could get off. The days just go by. One of my favorite sayings is, goes by like posting a picket fence. You know, those white fences with the up and downs. And You're driving by them and it's just a blur. You can't tell one from the other. It moves so fast. But there's no pause button. There's no way to slow it down. Maybe the pandemic has given us the idea we don't have to live under all that acceleration. Let me share something with you about time and about something we lost along the way. In 1949, my father moved us from the lush southern area of southern Indiana up to Winter, South Dakota. We arrived June of 1949. The town and the county were 40 years old. It was my privilege to work for a homesteader who had left Lincoln, Nebraska. In fact, our first assignment in Nebraska was at Claytonia, and I would find out years later after moving to Claytonia, that's the town he left from, to go up there. When I went to work for him, his son had already been involved a half a dozen years in the farm, and it was reaching the top of its condition. It was one of the best farm operations in the area. He was the envy of most of his neighbors. I watched during my lifetime from 1909 to 2009. They struggled to stay with that land so they'd get one of those 100-year plaques for farming in the same family. But by the time that 100 years went by, the homesteader was dead in the ground, his son was dead in the ground, the grandson who had stopped farming and gone someplace else came back to take care of his mother. The operation had been over a long time. They had long since rented out the land and sold all the cattle and all the equipment. I wrote a book about that called Living the Dream, based on that story. A man came up from Lincoln, Nebraska, stood in the middle of a field of waving grass, and there was nothing in horizon to horizon in any direction except more grass, and dreamed a dream. He lived out that dream, and it went full circle. And that's the story of 1,000 farms and ranches on the northern plains. But along with that, we not only erased the family farm, we erased small town America. So the title of the book I wrote was Living the Dream, subtitled The Golden Era in Rural America. You'll all get a kick out of this. I printed the book, had 100 copies made, and shredded every one of them. That book is so important to me, I got done reading it the first time through, it's got to be redone. But I talk in that book about life. Now, when we went there in 49, I'm a fifth grader, and I'm not interested in religious stuff at all, so my dad's preaching up front, and I'm counting people. That church in Winter, South Dakota in 1949 had an average attendance around 100, and I counted them, and there weren't 10 men in the sanctuary. When Dad left 6 years later, he had a Methodist men's group of 60, 12 trained pastors that went out preaching for pastors on vacation all over the state. 4 guys went into the ministry. The average attendance was over 300. Sunday night was over 100, and Bible study on Wednesday night was around 50. How did that happen? My dad wore out cars traveling that county, visiting people, building relationships. It would be my privilege during the ministry to have 2 church situations a little like that. Judy and I went to Kimball in 1987, started the spring of 87. I took that church in Kimball in a declining city, and we doubled the relationships, doubled the worship from 100 to over 200 in 7 years. Moved 100 miles east to Ogallala, we tripled that church in 5 years. Why? Building relationships. I've been saying this for years. This is a sophisticated day. We say that because of all the toys we have. But there's more pain out there than there's ever been. And if you go to any community, preach Christ down in Scripture and build relationships, you'll build a church, you'll attract people looking for answers. I don't know if Dad can do it today, and I don't know if I can do it again. Why? Because of the pressure in which we live. We have become enslaved to other people's calendars to where there is no time. In Kimball and Ogallala, one of my sons used to get a little frustrated. He said, "Boy, Dad, you drink a lot of coffee in a lot of restaurants." Yeah, I did. There was nothing more important than sitting over a cup of coffee with a guy who just lost his wife, lost his farm, lost his business, had a child in trouble, needed some help, and we would talk and talk and talk. How does that turn out? Well, we left Kimball in 1993. There's a guy named Ray that had a lot of uphill battles. I spent a lot of time with Ray. I never saw him from 1993. Haven't seen him since. But 2 years ago, the phone rang. His son said, "This is Darren. My mom died last night. Dad said, call Glenn before you call anybody else. I want him to know my wife at home." Last night, Jude and I were laying in bed, and she said, "Hey, look at this." And one of our sons had put a picture on Facebook or someplace of me cooking breakfast at our Florida home when they were down there visiting. And he immediately got a hit from Mike down in Arkansas. I haven't seen Mike for almost 20 years. He said, "How I'd like to be there and have him feed me breakfast so we could talk one more time." Relationships built on Christ are eternal. And I can't tell you how many times we've been with somebody we haven't seen for decades, and we start talking just like we had not been apart at all. But today we can't build those relationships. When I try, I usually get back this kind of a response. Well, let me check the calendar, or let me check with my wife, but they never come back. Doesn't mean they don't want to. It means we're enslaved to calendars. We need to take a look at that. We'll get off on this again probably in a few moments. Let's go back to Winter, South Dakota, for example. You silver-haired people remember this. I thought in high school I was under pressure. I didn't know what pressure was. The culture that I grew up with in South Dakota when Dad was building that church, when we moved there in 1949, there was one paved road, Highway 18, running east and west through town. 9 miles west, there was a road turned north towards Presho. That was paved, hadn't been for very long. 11 miles east was Clone. There was a road down into Nebraska to Bassett. Believe me, that was a gravel road. I went with my brother a number of times to get machinery from the Alice Chalmers dealership down to Bassett. It was a gravel road. Nobody left town for anything. Highway 44 with the bridge across Missouri over to Sioux Falls hadn't been done yet. A few rich people in town, a couple of weeks before school and a couple of weeks before Christmas, would go to Sioux City, Iowa to do some shopping. The rest of us, well, towns of the size of Neely and O'Neill and Winter. We had 4 hardware stores, 3 dime stores, 4 clothing stores. Every car make, tractor, truck, and automobile had a dealership there. We didn't leave town for anything. If you couldn't buy it, you went to Susan Roebuck Monkey Awards. And nobody went out of town to a sporting event. We had a curfew, 10 o'clock at night. Nobody had television. For the few people who could afford to sit, there wasn't even a television station in those days. Our only contact with the outside world was what some of the people probably in Elgin had, WNX, Yankton, South Dakota. And a blizzard, that was our time. School. School started at 9 o'clock and got out at 4. Bad people came in at 8 o'clock. The boys had their athletic sports, football, basketball, track. After school, the girls had glee club. We didn't have girls' sports yet. And the school was divided into 6 periods. You carried 4 subjects and had 2 study halls. Second hour was study hall for the entire high school, but it was also chorus practice. So we had a big chorus where a lot of kids rather sing than sit around for an hour. Again, I repeat, we thought we were under pressure. Today's 4th graders are under more pressure than I experienced back in high school. We had time. Mealtime. Judy and I try to do this all the time with our kids as well as my parents. Mealtime was come to the table and sit down, and you left when Dad said you could leave. It was family time. Not long ago, Brian said, "Dad, I was thinking about something." He said, "Your mom came to every athletic event any of us kids was in." Yep. But he said, "We never missed church and we never missed NYF, did we?" I said, "No, if you'd started doing that, you would have been in sports. That's the end of the story." I would have never allowed anything of earthly value to replace the eternal thing that we had to be laying on our kids. And today there are many parents out there getting their kids ready for the 70, nothing for eternity, and that generation will not be here when they get to be adults. You've taught them otherwise. Relationships take time. Jesus said, "By this will all know you are my disciples if you have love one for another." That's not done at the snap of a finger. That's built over time. maybe this pandemic was going to cause us to start appreciating time again, as the young lady said to me about their family. It was a blessing she had found. Let me tell you something about counting your blessings. I think a lot of it has to do with attitude, and attitude has to do with gratitude. Now, some of you heard me say this before. Judy and I retired to Florida and started working for Disney part-time, and then I got on church staff down there. And at the time, I was on the staff at Winter Haven in charge of adult ministries and consultant to the senior pastor. And at a Tuesday staff meeting, he said, by the way, Glenn, you got to take over Sunday. I've got to leave town. Just found out last night some relative was ill. So the next day, as we were on our way into Disney, I said to Judy, I've been having a hard time figuring out what to preach. People have not been that burden to me. And I really want to do the right thing. And Judy said, why don't you preach about gratitude? That had come from some incident she had been involved in where somebody didn't have any. So I was mulling that over. We were out in front of Spaceship Earth being receptionists, and here came a guy toward me with a t-shirt on. Diagonally across the t-shirt in black letters, it said attitude. But just before the word attitude, up here was 2 red letters, GR, which changed attitude to gratitude. And it was like God was saying to me, gratitude determines your attitude, and it really does. In fact, I want to say something to you. I want you to think about it. At any moment that I'm living in pure gratitude, I think it's impossible for me to sin. Sin has to do with discontentment and jealousies and wanting something I don't need and forgetting who I am under God. Gratitude. Where are you on gratitude? Let me throw out an illustration. You have a dream tonight. You're in heaven and Peter's showing you up and down the New Jerusalem. And he said, by the way, let's go show you your house. And he takes you to a street. Let's just say it's a mile long, continual upward grade. You start with some packing cases and furniture boxes down here that people live in. Up through thatched roofs and all the way up. About the middle of the way up, you get to some fairly nice ranch homes. He said, this is right in the middle and it's yours. Progressively, mathematically exactly, starting with your house and going downhill, they get progressively worse. Uphill, they get continually better, till up on top you see a column mentioned with a chauffeur-driven limousine. Which way do you look? Downhill or uphill? See, I've got I don't know what to call him, a grandnephew or what. You've heard me talk about Carol, and her son was the one burned to death. She has another son. Kelly's her youngest. He never knew his father. He grew up with a single mom who loved him. Contrary to his brothers, he took the straight road, I think, almost every time. At my brother's funeral in winter, we hung around a lot together, and he wanted to come to the car one last time. We were backing out to shake hands and tell us how glad he was to see us. So I started communicating with Kelly periodically because I think my brother was the kind of father figure in his life, and he's gone now. So I texted him this week, and I said, Kelly, how are you doing? The answer came back, I have a lot to be grateful for. That's all he needed to say. That tells me how he was doing. It tells me about his attitude towards life, his victory over life. I have a lot to be grateful for. Take a look at your attitude. Now, while you're doing that, and I just got into that illustration about the housing, Charles Swindoll made a statement several months back, and it was repeated by one of the athletes, and I tried to find out which one, couldn't find it. But Chuck Swindoll's statement was this: circumstances are 10% of your life. How you respond to those circumstances is 90% of your life. Now, did you get what he was saying? You're all going to be hit with circumstances, and some of you don't have a choice over. It doesn't matter. They are 10%. What you do with them is 90%. He was absolutely right on. Absolutely. The Mojave Desert is a wicked place. It is hot. The wind blows all the time. There's no moisture. Navajo Indians inhabit it. They don't talk English, or did not at the time. Into this alien, angry environment came Thelma Thompson. Her husband was stationed at an Air Force base right on the edge of the desert. Did not know until I did a little research last night. He died a little later on in the European theater. At the time they were stationed there, he was gone all the day long on maneuvers. Thelma would get up dry, dust blowing in all the time. She didn't matter how hard she cleaned. There was always a coat of dust on everything. She said one time she opened the refrigerator door and it had dust in it. Bugs, snakes, spiders, lizards, and she couldn't communicate with anybody. She did that for a few weeks, and finally she couldn't take it anymore. She went down to the telegraph office and telegraphed her dad, "Dad, I can't stand it here. Send money. I'm coming home." She sat down on a bench and waited for the money. The guy came out and handed her a note. "Dear daughter, 2 men looked out from prison bars. One saw him with mud and the other saw a star. Loved Dad." And that was it. She was angry. She walked and she paced and threw fits, she said. But after a while, it just kept ringing in her ears. 2 men looked out from prison stars. One saw mud, the other saw stars. She decided to do something with that. In 1943, she published a book. The name of the book is Bright Ramparts. Incidentally, you can still buy it. It's not published. You'll start out at $150. I found out last night if you want to buy one. She became a world-renowned, accepted authority on turquoise jewelry, on the pottery that the Navajos made, on desert life. She would end up later speaking all across the country on those subjects. She learned the language of the natives and got acquainted with them and became dear friends to some of them. Now, what changed? The desert hadn't changed. It's still dirty and dry and windy and filled with all kinds of insects that she didn't want. But she changed. 2 men looked out from prison bars. One saw mud. It was a reality. We got a reality now. It's called COVID-19. We deal with it. But there's also the stars, which the young lady was saying to me last week. She saw some stars. Closer family relationships, more time together. We don't want to lose that. Let's take the time. Now, some of you think that I pick on sports. I love sports. Some of our children were pretty good at it, and they gave us a lot of thrills on the football field and on the basketball court. But some of them learned to put it in perspective. Greg was Athlete of the Year in O'Neill in '77. A few years later, Brian was. Keith determined that he had to do what his 2 brothers did. He said, until one day, at the beginning of my senior year, I'm walking down the hallway and I'm looking at those pictures. And I came to the picture of my 2 brothers and said, yeah, I got to do that. And then he said it was kind of like God started talking to me. So that's what you're going to give yourself to. And he said, God clearly made me understand this. Keith, if you get to be Athlete of the Year, the picture doesn't go up till school's over. They make that decision the last few days of school. So the first time a student body walks by and sees your picture, 25% of them are going to say, who's that? The second year, 50% of the student body is going to say, who's that? 3 years later, 75% of the student body is going to say, who's that? And 4 years later, they're going to say, who cares? Nobody will remember. I don't know if you saw the true story, Greater, the story of that football player out of Arkansas that was fat and pudgy and told he would never play, and he turned that school around. When they lost a game that cost them the national championship, he was talking to the quarterback who had become a Christian under his influence. And he said, I'm sorry. He said, this cost us the championship. They're going to crucify you. The quarterback looked at him and said, so how real is that? 5 years, nobody will remember. They have to look up in a book to find out who won. No, I'll go face the music. This is real. What do we give ourselves to? What do we see? I hope that this coronavirus is making you stop and look and take time and start looking at what's important. God let me know a couple of years ago when I was dealing with some of this stuff, in all the mass of confusion, accelerated lives we live, what's important? What lasts? A couple of weeks ago, I talked to you about a multi-millionaire who went out to the grave and they lowered him in the ground. He didn't take anything with him, and not one person said they were sorry to see him go. That's ultimate failure. You know what's eternal? And those near-death experiences, movies like Heaven is Real, people that I've been with when they're dying, the one thing that is eternal is relationships. We will take into eternity all Christian relationships. Their lifetime, more than that, they are eternal. I hope during this coronavirus you stop, slow down, think about what's important, and start giving yourself to that instead of the temporary stuff that's going to be erased anyway at the end of your 70. Now, share a couple of words with all of you before I close with prayer. For April, we were already not able to meet as a congregation, and at 7 o'clock on that Sunday evening, we had communion. Tonight, we're going to do it just a little bit different. All of our church family, the few that are helping me run this, we're going to gather here, and at 7 o'clock tonight, I'm going to lead you in communion. Get something to drink, something to eat. We will go through it. It will be just a little bit closer together. Some of you said it was a wonderful feeling in April when we did that. We will lead you in it tonight. The other thing, share with people. I keep getting notifications that 38 people want to contact me on Facebook. I'm not into Facebook. We're using it. I don't do that. But my email address, if you want to contact me for any reason, is Glenn W. Loy with 2 N's, 1 word, lowercase, @gmail.com. I will respond to you that way. I hope you have a good week. Now, one other final thing. We've been told that tomorrow they're going to start lifting the lockdown stuff and churches can meet next Sunday. We're not going to do that yet. There are several reasons why. The instructions we've been given is this. We can meet next Sunday as a church. You will wear a mask. You will not pass your offering plate. You will not sing. And you'll be practicing social distancing. But the insurance companies have also informed us they're not going to cover anything that happens. So we're not free yet. Besides that, we have a hot spot in Madison not that far away. We will wait a while longer till we feel like it's safe to be together. In the meantime, pray for one another. Tonight when we finish communion, it's my prayer that you'll spend a little time in your mind going over every other person in our church family, holding them up in prayer. It's been a joy to be with you. I look forward to that time when we can gather together again. It won't be exactly like it was before ever again. There'll be a new norm, but we will meet it. Let's pray. Almighty God, every time we meet together, we ask you to come down in your Holy Spirit. Invade those inner recesses where no one else can go and where we ourselves do not always understand. We generally have our church family in mind, but for every person hearing us today, do that for them. Come closer to them. Help them to look out, to see the stars instead of the mud, to start thinking about what's really important, and start building on foundations that will last. God bless our leadership in the church and in the nation around the world, and help the church to come alive again. May this serve to help us in that rebirth. We ask it in your name. Amen.
I'm going to step in here a minute real quick. We always forget to do this and we don't mean to do it or sound bad. Send in your tithing. That's how our church survives. And we got bills to pay. Even though we're not meeting, we still have expenses to pay. So please send in your tithing to the church address. And very appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, because I think Deb and Vicky would have both called me today. Our offering last week was disastrous. It's been fantastic, except for last week. So folks, get back at it. Be faithful like you've always been. Go in peace. Amen.